Hey, you're listening to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, integrative fertility health coach, and lover of all things nature and animals. I'm on a mission to have intentional conversations about the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond. My mindful guest and I will be talking about struggles, wins, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as we enter motherhood. My background in healthcare has shown me how broken our medical system is. My own struggles to become pregnant has shown the lack of support for mamas to be, the lack of guidance for women to have a nourishing and vibrant pregnancy, the isolation, mom guilt, and all the things we hold after bringing baby earthside. I want this platform to be a place where women can feel connected, safe, and supported to share and hear their stories. A place to use our voice to discuss and advocate about what we need and deserve as mothers. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. This episode, I'll be talking with Dr. Danielle Plummer. She is a third-generation pharmacist and an advocate for improving maternal health care. After suffering through 3 difficult pregnancies that really left her malnourished due to extreme vomiting from Hyperemesis Gravidarum, she learned while in pharmacy school that there is support for diseases like that through nutrition and medication management. And today we're going to be talking about her personal experience with hyperemesis and how she now helps women who struggle with the same thing during their pregnancy, which, if you're listening to this podcast, you have either been pregnant in the past or you hope to be pregnant. And it is something that can not only affect the mother's health, but it can affect the baby's health, especially from a nutritional perspective. So Danielle is just like this angel from above who is so passionate about this topic. I met Danielle this past April, May, and I can just tell by all of our conversations that we have had, she is so driven and so passionate about this topic. So I knew I just needed to have her on to talk about this and to really shed a lot of light on it. I feel like it's a topic that's not talked about too much. And unfortunately, it kind of seems like doctors aren't super educated on how they can support women. And Danielle has really spent so much time educating herself and others on this. So welcome, Danielle. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Let's just jump right in, talk about your experience, a little bit about you, and how this has driven your passion to helping women who have, really experienced the same thing that you went through, not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Katie, thank you so much for having me on today. Like you said, we met in May, and it's just been an absolute delight to meet other pharmacists who are just supporting pregnant women at any point in their journey. The knowledge we have going through school, we're not told, hey, these are opportunities out there, and unfortunately end up in these spaces because of our own experiences. And to be able to have that knowledge, pay it forward, and make the change for future generations of women and their families and the babies that follow, right? It's just, I feel very fortunate. I think an angel is just overly kind, but when you meet these women and your interventions literally change their trajectory, it does feel really good. And that's why we are where we are, because we have that passion to know this, they're not now getting the best care possible, and we can help improve what they're receiving, and the physical, the mental, the financial outcomes are vast. So thank you for that super kind introduction. I do always like to say my hands are in a lot of pots when it comes to maternal health. So just to be clear, what we talk about today is my own experiences, my own based on education, the women I've worked with, and my own business, and not affiliated with any of the other companies or associations for which I work. So now that the disclaimer is out there, do you have a place you'd like to begin? I could talk for hours on this topic.
Yeah, I would really love to start with your experience and how that was for you. We can talk about all 3 pregnancies, or if there was one particular one that was just really troublesome for you. And it's funny that you mentioned the financial aspects of it, because you don't really think about it. But if you are so sick and you can't go to work, Like, I know these women are getting hospitalized, and yeah, there would be a financial factor to it. And I've never really thought about that.
Huge financial factor. And I think most clinicians don't look at it from that perspective either, right? So it depends. Do you have insurance? What insurance do you have? And our insurance companies really dictate who you go to for care. Some people say, oh, if you're not getting the care you need from your doctor, switch. But in a pregnancy, it's not that easy to find a new obstetrician or midwife or even a primary care doctor if you're preparing for pregnancy or recovering from pregnancy, where we're really that hole in healthcare, that gap. And insurances really, unfortunately, dictate a lot of our care. Just trying to get a pregnant woman, when you are so ill, you lose your job, you can't go to work. We don't have the financial or the laws to take care of us, really, women in the workforce, which is a necessity with the cost of living today, whether you want to or not. I love working. I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and my I'm so kind to those, because that is not easy. Each one of us, we are in a day and age where we have the right to choose if we want to or not. But for those of us who want to be working, to have this reason to get up and help others and go to work and live the life that we want to live, we don't in the United States have the support through laws and resources. And if you read like your HR guidelines, it'll say we do, but we really don't, right? And this is not where I was going to start, but you got me on this tangent. FMLA is 13 weeks. If you have a job where you're a full-time employee with benefits that offers FMLA, if you take that in that first trimester or middle and earlier in the pregnancy, you don't have it later on for when you're home with that baby, right? If you try to go on disability, I have coworkers, not even with hyperemesis, but any variety of things that can go wrong in a pregnancy. They try to go on disability, and the disability insurance companies that you are offered through your employer are telling them it's a pre-existing condition and therefore it's not covered. We need to get our lawmakers working on this and fixing this. And we want to know our jobs are going to be held for us, because we know this is a temporary time in our life and it's not forever. But it is still a longer period of time that we can't be out of work without an income, right? And then that snowballs, because when you are not in the workforce doing what you love, your career's not growing. So you're losing the growth in that. You're losing potential bonuses, annual pay raises, 401k matches. There's so many things financially outside of what the cost of the healthcare itself is costing that family. So, yes, if we have anyone listening who works in human resources or in our legal field in employment law, please, please, please bring this to the forefront. But going back to my experiences, yes, it happened to me. I was young, I was in love, I was happily married. I did not know a lot of women who were pregnant just because of schooling and moving and whatnot. And the ones I knew, they had, a little bit of illness and then they glowed. And when you see in pop culture, that's what happens. Somebody will vomit once or twice and then they glow and they have this exciting pregnancy. And there I found myself pregnant from the moment I missed my period. I started feeling nauseous, and it snowballed and it escalated. And I didn't have a primary care doctor. I got one. I was working. My spouse at the time was a full-time grad student, and we didn't know anything about the medical field. My undergrad's in hotel management, in hospitality. I didn't know anything about medical. And there I was, just so completely ill. And I was fortunate in hindsight that I had an office full of women that were extremely supportive of me. And they kept saying, Danielle, you have to go see a doctor. And I was like, what doctor do I go to? And I ended up becoming so ill. I went to the emergency room, and I don't remember any of this. It's a big fog. And my spouse then was in the Marine Corps and was deployed out to cold weather training in Norway. And I was really left alone through this. And it was just a nightmare. I just remember them giving me a lot of bags of fluids and sending me home. And that was it, without any, who do I follow up with? Where do I go? I was 7 weeks pregnant. I didn't have an obstetrician yet. I ended up getting an obstetrician and having some girlfriends and coworkers, really my network, my support, taking care of me, going, Danielle, this is not normal. I didn't know what was normal, what wasn't normal. And everyone kept telling me it'll go away at 12 weeks.
Mm.
So there I am, a month of this getting worse and worse and worse, losing weight, feeling ill, my mental health just starting to suffer. And I'd go back to the emergency room and get another bag of fluid. And I finally got an obstetrician, and they confirmed the pregnancy, and they're like, okay, take a prenatal vitamin, which was not possible to stay down. And I remember one time just being on my couch, I'd called out of work numerous days at that point, asking the obstetrician, what do I do? And the response was, well, you don't sound sick.
Mm.
Right? I'm like, it took all the strength I had
Oh.
to make this phone call. And that's why my voice wasn't reflecting the state of physical state that I was in. So went back to the emergency room, right? And this went on. I did at that time get a newer obstetrician who treated me. I thought, well, I was only offered at the time Phenergan suppository, right? It can stay in, it can be absorbed, but then it would make me comatose. I would sleep for 12 hours. And
Mm.
all I could think about was like, well, at least I'm not ill during those 12 hours I'm sleeping, but I'm also not living. And I went from being I've always had, I joke, 2.5 jobs, right? I had my full-time job in hospitality. I coached ice skating part-time. And I would think as the day would go on, you get up and it's so hard to get out of bed. And as the day would go on, oh, I'd be like, now I'd be going to work. Now I'd be out lunch with my coworkers. Now I'd be coming back. Now I'd be coming home. Now I'd be going to my evening to coach my little skaters. And all these things go on through the day. And I didn't realize how much I did in a day until they were taken away from me and I couldn't get off the couch or out of my bed. And the only option for medications put me to sleep. It was awful. It was awful. I was very fortunate that I had at that point an easy delivery. And as soon as the placenta was delivered, I didn't know at the time that's what it was. I thought it was as soon as the baby was delivered. Now I know it was the placenta. It's like somebody flicked a light switch and I felt like myself again. And that was it. And thought I put that experience past me. I was just so grateful to have this beautiful baby in my arms and know that that was worth it. And it was just my lot in life. I just had this horrible pregnancy and thought that was it. And nobody ever told me the name of my disease state. Nobody told me there's other options. Nobody told me, hey, keep asking, keep advocating for yourself. Nobody said talk to your pharmacist, right? It would never have occurred to me to talk to a pharmacist. And here I am. So I was told, oh, just because it happens once doesn't mean it happens again. Research from the Her Foundation, you can find them at hyperemesis.org, show that over 80% does happen in subsequent pregnancies. But being the optimist I am, 2.5 years later, I was like, it might not happen again. Let me try again. And it did. At that point, I was living on an overseas military base in Okinawa, had a very caring doctor, but because we had more women at childbearing age living on that base than obstetricians, unless you were considered high risk, you went to your primary care doctor for obstetrics. It just was. And I actually found this doctor from an active duty female Marine who was a good friend of mine at the time. And she said he's great. And I stayed with him and he was very caring. And I know now he didn't know better. We don't know what to offer these women. Again, I was just offered Phenergan. It would knock me out. I had a toddler to take care of. It was a nightmare. It was just a true and total nightmare. And I said, that's it. I'm done. After the end of that, still didn't have an accurate name to my disease. But the funny thing now is I have my medical records. I'm aging myself, but this was before electronic health records. And I can look. And I actually have a picture of it in one of my blogs on my website. And you can see it says, try to drink more fluids, come back if needed. Like it was just mind baffling. There was no true medical advice in any of those medical records. Here's another Phenergan suppository, which when you're already feeling ill, that is not fun. And now we know there's pharmacists have better options. We can compound creams. We can try one of a dozen different medications. What we know now, again, research published by the Her Foundation, Dr. Melina Fejo, Kimber McGibbon, USC, shows it's the GDF15 gene that's released from the placenta that's causing the extreme emesis, far greater in these patients than patients going through chemotherapy. My goal is to get existing like bags of fluid, like we do for our oncology patients, like we have protocols in place for our alcoholics coming into the emergency room. And said every time you have a sick pregnant woman coming into your emergency room, this is what you go through step by step, so we can standardize and improve the care at a minimum. Then personalize it and go, okay, you tried this med failed you. What can we try next? What's on formulary? What's off formulary? Make sure they get discharged with medications to go home so they're not back in that emergency room 24 hours later, which is exactly what happened. They're band-aids, right? I've presented numerous times now to ER practitioners, and they say the same thing. We don't want them here. They don't want to be here. What can we do? And I feel like I'm having these conversations, but hospitals across the United States, for that matter, around the world, are not having these conversations. And there's a lot you can do. So if we have anyone listening who works in emergency medicine, please check your hospital's policies, protocols, see if you have anything for women with nausea and vomiting in pregnancy to decide, is it a morning sickness? Is it some degree of hyperemesis gravidarum? And have a standardized policy. Should we get case management involved to get home health set up so that they're not recurring? But I'll back up now. At the time that I was in Okinawa, I waited many, many years. I thought I was done. I have two beautiful daughters. I was done. Never again. It was a nightmare. And at 4 years later, I got the guts to try again. And I come from a small family, and my family said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know." At the time, my spouse at the time said, "I really want a big family. I really want a son. Let's try again." And I don't know. I thought I had all my ducks in a row. I was on an overseas military base. We were in Spain. I had a small hospital that was underutilized. I had no cost health care because it was TRICARE overseas. I thought I knew what I was doing. And I, to this day, have PTSD going to that emergency room. And I'm thinking they were corpsmen at the time saying to me, "Well, you haven't tried this or you haven't tried that." And I got what I now know was metoclopramide, right? Reglan. And I don't know if it was a push or a piggyback, but I, for the only time in my life, had panic and anxiety, and it was horrible. My heart goes out to anyone who suffers from this regularly through their life. I will never forget this experience. I was 7 weeks in that emergency room, panicking, feeling like I can't do this. I'm 7 weeks. I have to get to 40. There is no way. And what was interesting, and I might hit a hot topic here, but I learned later a lot of women terminate from this. And that never even had occurred to me. It just never occurred to me. I was pregnant. I was happily married. Would never have occurred to me. That's when you look at the reality, though. There's a lot of reasons. A lot of times it's termination for medical reasons. Their organs are failing. Sometimes it's that financial. They lost their job. They lose their house. They can't afford to feed their family. Their social life is just isolating. I was living in Spain at the time and remember thinking, I can't do this. But I was in a country, and now we know in a lot of states in the United States, that's not an option. And I knew I had to force through this. And I really did end up with another horrible, horrible third pregnancy. And my bones suffered, my teeth suffered. And I thought I had all my ducks in a row. I had friends and family to support. I actually had a nanny for my other two girls who were 2 and 4, or 4 and 6 at the time. And I had a spouse who cared. I had a doctor who cared. But yet I had no treatment, no medication therapy in place. I had no mental health support to get me through that. And even the women in my community then were like, it's normal. We all suffer from this. And thought, why is this normal? Why are we all suffering from this? I like to say that phrase, pregnancy brain, shouldn't be a phrase. It's like vitamin B deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, right? Nutrient deficiency, sleep deficiency. You're not extra. When you take away the three fundamentals that make us healthy, what we can eat, our quality of sleep, and our exercise, what does that do to the state of that person, right? And there I was, 3 years or 3 pregnancies, and had put it behind me. It was during the third pregnancy that I found the Her Foundation and found out there's a name to my disease state. I am not alone, and was just grateful for those online support groups at the time. After my baby was born, and I'm grateful to have these 3 healthy children, I started pharmacy school. And it was in pharmacy school, Katie, I was just telling you about the story, right? I remember learning about total parental nutrition and doing the math and learning the disease states and thought, we can feed people who can't eat? Why did I go through 27 months of my life and nobody mentioned the word nutrition? We know now as pharmacists and doctors know there's a risk every time you put a line into a patient That risk is real. The risk of infection is there. But what's the best option when a woman is pregnant and not getting any nutrients? I don't think I got banana bags. Now I'm like, that should be the first thing. Anyone goes to the emergency room, get them a banana bag. They're at risk for Wernicke's encephalopathy, right? So there's so much we can do. I could talk for hours, but that is my story. And that is how I got to where I am. I started this blog, and before I knew it, I had women around the world just asking me for help. And to be that shining beacon, right? That light to say, there's support, there's help. You are not alone. This is what you have. These are steps you can take next to get you through so it doesn't escalate into severe cases.
Mm-hmm. Wow, there's so much to unpack here, but I can see, where the passion is coming from, because it's not like you just had one experience. You had three, and separated by a pretty gap, in between each pregnancy. So it's like hoping for a different outcome with each one. And that's a span of what? So your first child to your last was what, 6 years, right?
Yeah. 6.5
Yeah.
years in age. So over 7, right? Yes.
Yeah. It's just,
Mhm.
that is so much. Pregnancy in of itself is like prepping for a marathon, but it's like you're prepping for this marathon, but then you can't even drink, and you can't even eat, and you can't even rest. It's like even
Right.
trying to take care of yourself.
Right.
So it's so, and I guess what you don't know, we don't know at the time. So it's great that you are learning so much about it now. And that's something that I would really like to dive in, because you were mentioning that the placenta has that certain gene. And I know you and I have talked about this outside of the podcast. Have you found any correlation of why certain women have that gene, maybe compared to others? What maybe causes it to be present for 80% of women in subsequent pregnancies? Pretty much give me what you got, like, on all of that. And then even after that, we can go into what should women be expecting to get from their providers if they have hyperemesis. Like, how can they advocate for themselves? Today's episode of Rising into Mindful Motherhood is proudly sponsored by the Confident Conception membership. Are you or someone you know on what feels like a never-ending journey to motherhood, facing an uphill battle of fertility challenges? I'm Dr. Katie, your podcast host, pharmacist, and integrative fertility coach with over a decade of experience. I've been where you are, and I understand the roller coaster of emotions and heartache. That's why I've created the Confident Conception membership, a program designed to help you address the real reasons behind fertility challenges. Like my client Elizabeth, who struggled with fertility for 9 years, having tried and failed other programs. She was in disbelief when just a couple of months into using my Confident Conception method, she finally got her first positive pregnancy test and welcomed her healthy baby boy this year. Using the Confident Conception method, we combine traditional medicine and energy healing to unlock your innate and abundant fertility potential. This isn't just about putting a Band-Aid on to cover up the physical symptom. It's about healing the energetic and physical root causes. As a member, you'll receive personalized guidance, bi-weekly live coaching calls, and become a part of a supportive community of like-minded women who truly understand what you're going through. We offer flexible payment options, plus our annual members receive exclusive savings and bonuses to accelerate their path to pregnancy. Don't let another month of frustration and overwhelm pass you by. As a special offer to our listeners, you can use the promo code PODCAST10 to receive 10% off the lifetime of your membership. Secure your spot now and expedite your journey to motherhood today by visiting www.yourempoweredfertility.com/membership to learn more and enroll. Together, we'll pave the way to your confident conception for a future filled with joy, unconditional love, and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. The link is in the show notes. Sign up today and your future self will thank you.
Okay, there's a lot there. I'll answer the first question. And unfortunately, the answer is no. We don't know exactly what's triggering that. I love the science of epigenetics, right? What's turning that on? What's turning that off? There's no one in my family, no females that I know that had this disease.
Mm,
So could it be coming from the male DNA in that placenta,
mhm.
right, as
Yeah,
well?
yeah.
Women whose family moms or aunts or grandmothers that they heard those stories, oh, my grandma was so sick in my pregnancy, they're telling me that they had it as well, and then learned, oh, mom or grandma had it as well. But my case, and I was actually just earlier today on a phone call with a woman who said, no, no one in my family. I said, yeah, no one in my family had it either. So that science isn't quite there yet.
Mhm.
This research that was published, I was talking about, it is relatively new. I think 2018 maybe was when it was first published by Dr. Fejer was the lead investigator on that study, and has since then published a lot more and found other genes that do come into play with it. Stress and inflammatory factors. So in the United States, we're seeing increased rates of, Katie, I've talked about, right? IVF, right? Why are so many women having to go through this process to become pregnant? Hyperemesis, like we're talking about today, preeclampsia,
Mm,
what's causing these genes to be secreted from the hormones. When we look at is it our environment? Is it our diet? And when I say our diet, I've met really like women, correct childbearing age, young, healthy, very nutritious conscious, who end up with any one of these pregnancy disease states. And it's why. So you have to wonder what the food that we're eating, as our soil isn't as rich as it should be or used to be, right? Even if you're not eating processed foods and you're going to your farmers markets and you're trying to get as healthy as possible, they're still ending up with these disease states. So why? Is there some toxicities in the air? Are they under stress because we're trying to work to support a family in a house while we're also trying to become pregnant, right? Or you and I know, like a lot of women through grad school are also, are they putting off grad school so they can have children, or are they becoming pregnant during grad school, or are they going to grad school and putting off becoming, getting married, potentially having children later in life? So there's so many factors that come into play, but any of those inflammatory factors can increase any of these stress, the genes caused from the stress. So that comes into play, but I haven't seen the science yet. It might be out there. I know the Her Foundation is working heavily with companies to get this. The dream to be, can we get a prognostic test, a diagnostic
yeah.
test, and a targeted therapy like we have for our oncology patients? Let's target those genes so that they're not escalating and raising to that level. But like you said, what else is happening in that time that would increase the levels? And it's just that the Her Foundation's been working for 25 years to get this information. And now our government, the NIH or CDC, they're going, okay, maternal health is at atrocious levels. We have more women becoming sick because of a pregnancy related disease, or actually losing their life because of a pregnancy related disease in the United States, on par with developing countries. And this is not okay. So now there's grants being given to states. Certain states are creating maternal mortality committees to investigate this and find out why. But looking at hyperemesis specifically, it's coming soon. I'm hoping, my fingers are crossed.
Yeah, yeah. It's good to know that there are people out there invested in researching and looking into this, because it is just, my pharmacist brain is just like, what is causing this? What is behind all of it? Is it something that can be prevented, or is it just, the mixing of the male's genes with the woman's, what is it? So hopefully someday we will have some more answers. But for now, what can women do that are just so sick they can't get off the couch, like you said, can't really function in their normal day-to-day lives?
So the first thing you want to do is determine what's the severity at this moment in time and keep records of everything. There's many ways to do this, right? There's apps out there. You can go old school, handwrite something. And if you don't even have the strength to like verbalize what you're feeling, I like the Her Foundation's website. They created a scoring system that you can look at how many times have I vomited? How many days of work have I lost? What else is going on? And they have a lot of questions you can answer to track that. So I recommend tracking that, because when you see something in paper and you bring that to your doctor, well, paper, but in writing, right? Of some sort, digital writing, and bring that to your doctors. A lot of times women historically were not believed. And you could say, oh, I haven't kept food down in days. And the clinicians go, okay, sure. But if you can bring a patient advocate with you, bring that concrete, no, I vomited 30 times today. I'm vomiting up bile. And I probably should have put a trigger warning before this conversation. And this is the last time I actually kept food down. And this is what I've tried. And this is what's not working. There's other tweaks we can do. And I know you and I have some mutual colleagues here who specialize in nutrition and functional medicine and herbalism. There's a lot of things. Protein's really important to get that prior. When you go, as I want to say, as soon as you realize something's not normal, believe yourself, get those around you to come to that, whether it's a spouse, a significant other, a mom, a friend, or a paid patient advocate. Bring somebody with you when you go to see your doctor. And I learned this one from another patient advocate. Ask to record the conversation, because you can't remember a lot of what that doctor tells you. The doctors that I get to meet in my daily life are so phenomenal. And I see there's this disconnect between the doctors that I'm working with and the patients that are reaching out to me. So let's get that gap, that bridge covered, and get all doctors taking this disease. The earlier you treat this and get on a good regimen, the less it will progress to severe states, to lead them off to think, oh my gosh, I can't get through this. It's really important. I'm a big believer in pharmacogenetics. I need these payers, the insurance companies, to get on board with this for pregnancy. In the meantime, I offer a service. If anyone's interested, I partner with some different labs to get this. Let's get you on the safest medication. So it's twofold. You want to increase your nutrients and your hydration. And if you're using medication therapy, in the case of hyperemesis, you're going to end up on a combination of antiemetics and potentially antacids to help bring this down. So on one, I would like to think of it like the old kind of balance scale. You want to increase your nutrients, your vitamins, your minerals, your hydration, and decreasing the vomiting. How are you going to decrease the vomiting? And that's where initially you're going to have to get that IV therapy, but before you actually, not initially, but when you get to that severe state, right, that's the only thing that's going to work. Before you get there, always ask, what other routes do these meds come? I can't swallow. I love to promote compounding pharmacies. Any of the medications that we're using, almost all of them can be compounded into a cream, absorbed topically. Of course, absorption isn't going to be the same from pharmacy to pharmacy. So, ask those questions, but real simple answer. What comes in a patch? What comes in a cream? What comes, we know suppositories, we know disintegrating or dissolvable medications, and ask the risks and benefits of each. Of course, the first thing you do is rule out any type of teratogenic effect. Don't trust Google. Please don't trust Google, and don't trust the law firms advertising out there about medications. Trust your pharmacist, talk to your doctor, ask your medical care team. The only medications we have to decrease vomiting do not target that GDF15 gene. So they all have potential large adverse effects for the mom. For example, ondansetron won't make you sleepy, but it can cause severe constipation. It could cause QT prolongation. And if you're in a state of electrolyte deficiencies, that's something you want to be careful for. Think about, like I said, I was offered Phenergan and it knocked me out, right? There's different things that we can do. So ask those pros and cons and see ask your pharmacist, can we tweak these medication regimens so that maybe you take your sleepy med at night, your other meds, or a lot of people think meds should be taken as needed, but you want to prevent that cycle, so take it scheduled. Or how high can you go? Am I optimizing that? I guess a lot of the listeners are pharmacists, or clinicians. So I like to throw out some category names, right? The antiemetics we have, they're antihistamines, they're serotonin antagonists, and a lot of them are antipsychotics. So if a mom Googles this med and see they're on an antipsychotic, they're going to think, this doctor thinks I'm crazy. They're not believing me. But that's not the case. They're using it for the antiemetic properties, but obstetricians are traditionally not trained in long-term adverse effects of antipsychotic meds. So if you start getting twitchy eyes, twitchy muscles, muscle pain, bring it to your pharmacist, look at the list and say, hey, this is what I'm taking. And just like every pharmacist is trained on, when are most medication, I want to say mishaps happening? Transitions of care. So if that mom's going to the ER or being admitted to the hospital and then discharged back home, what can stay on her profile and what should be decreased? So I guess the in a word or a phrase to answer your question, what can a mom do? Right? Get on a medication regimen and then bring that to each visit and revisit it and say, this is working, this isn't, this adverse effect is destroying my life. I can't get to work every day. What can I do? And it's actually, I learned so much from the moms as well, and learned that there are IV backpacks you can bring to work. We have these for other disease states. Let's get them for our hyperemesis moms.
Wow, amazing. Thanks for all that information. And I love the tip of keeping a journal because it can be so hard. Like once you get to that doctor's appointment, it's like, I just kind of think of the common question, like, how are your bowel movements? And it's like, I don't, you know what I mean? I feel like what you don't track, you can't keep track of. So it's such a great idea to keep a journal of how many times are you getting sick? How many days are you calling into work? So definitely check out, I think it's the Her Foundation, right?
Hyperemesis.org. And if
Yeah.
you have listeners in the UK, Pregnancy Sickness Support is a great organization there. And there's other ones popping up around the world. There's some in Australia and New Zealand. But no matter where you are, the Her Foundation supports everyone around the world as well. And that's the beauty of the internet, right? Today, when I was pregnant and the internet was still young, I am definitely aging myself. Yeah, like it was really hard to get information. Information is so easily accessed, but it's not all accurate and correct. So just say, hey, I read this, and ask your doctor and let's see, what does the doctor say? Is that true? Is it not true? And is it something we could try or stay away from? It could be cause more harm than good.
Absolutely. And you and I were talking before the podcast. You have a freebie or an offer for the listeners. Could you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So earlier this year, I spoke at a conference for emergency medicine doctors. And before I went to present, I wanted to bring a handout with me for everyone there. And I asked my followers online, what is something you'd want the emergency room to know about Hyperemesis gravidarum? And woke up 24 hours later, the next morning, and then within 24 hours had over 100 responses. My mind, it was blown. I mean, there's so much need to improve the care of these women. It was supposed to be a one-page handout. It turned into a 22-page booklet. I have a free
Wow.
download. Please, please, everybody download it. Bring it every time you go to the emergency room. Share a link. If you want a physical copy, message me and I will send you one. It's just so important. The number one thing, Katie, you want to take a guess?
The number one thing for people to do?
That they want their emergency medicine doctors to know?
Oh gosh. Either the meds that they're on or how many times they got sick.
Believe me.
Oh, that's
Want to
a good
be
one.
believed. Believe me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, right, let's start there. Let's let
Yeah.
society know this is a real disease state. It needs to be treated medically appropriate to prevent it from escalating and not let any woman suffer alone. No, they're believed. And Katie, I mentioned earlier too, why it's so important to get the proper diagnosis in the medical records, because we want to get accurate numbers. We want the insurances on
Mm-hmm.
top of this and also treating it seriously and offering that support. So if a mom calls their insurance and says, hey, do I get home health? And they're going to be like, how do I even begin to navigate this? Right. And I didn't mention when the moms go into the emergency room or admitted into the hospital and they don't feel like they're being heard or treated seriously, ask to speak to that hospital's case manager as well. And they'll help bridge that gap of communication while you're there. And then see if you could set up maybe home health as well. So you don't have to go back to the emergency room. We don't want to be around contagious people when we're pregnant, right? That's the last place we want to be. So whatever care you can get done at home, definitely start there and prevent those repeat hospital visits. Around the country, I think more and more women now are going to midwives. And I know in Nevada, not too long ago, we just got approved or up and running for our first freestanding birthing center, which is really exciting. And I know it really varies by state, but like look at your alternatives. And if you are too many days in between getting to see an obstetrician, I always like to recommend insurances are now covering doula care. So please see and get a doula on board. That's the support you'll get and the knowledge, and find out about resources you might in your community you might not have otherwise known that are available too. A lot of times hyperemesis is not a standalone disease. It's diagnosed by a disease of rule out. What else could be causing extreme nausea and vomiting? Rule those out, and then look at your lab levels, look at your quality of life like we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
See what needs to be treated to prevent it from escalating, and doulas can help you navigate that. Most people think of a labor and delivery doula. You want that as well, of course, but what can help earlier? Who can you lean on professionally for support? So always my plug for a doula.
Yes, absolutely. So would it be set different from a labor and delivery doula?
It's a good question. There's not a lot of antepartum doulas out there. I got a doula certification because it's kind of the work I'm doing anyways, and learned just so much. But yeah, how you bill, it's going to be, or how you pay for it. That's a great question. And I don't think we have answers to that yet. As far as insurances, that it's so new for insurances to be covering this, it might be out of pocket. But if you know you can get your first trimester, at least the first half of the pregnancy, in really good shape, get that nutrition going, you have the support later on, that's something for each individual to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to know that doulas exist for this phase of the pregnancy and not just the latter phases, prepping for birth and then the actual delivery and all of that.
Absolutely. So please download my Dear ER Doctor Believe Me book. It's free for everybody, and share that to get that information. There's a lot of really just great tips and advice, both on a personal level and on a medical level as well, that everybody should know to support these women, because it really affects not just the hospitals in their home, but we talked about work. If you're working with a pregnant woman, if you have a family or a friend or a neighbor, everybody, it takes that village, right? And everybody can offer in that support.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the link for that will be in the show notes. So, yes, I would love for you to share where people can connect with you, find you, and then any final last words that you have for the
Uh,
listener.
Perfect, Katie. Thank you. So the website I have that does pharmacogenetic testing for pregnancy, we do all types of pregnancy care with medication management. It's obstet-rx.com. So it looks like obstetrics, but with an RX. And I'm starting a new blog for pregnancy vomiting specifically. So that'll be pregnancyvomiting.com. And you can find me in either one of those locations online. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn as a network to share professional information. So that's the one I'm on the most. I have one of my daughters helping me with the other social media platforms, and I'll get on more social media soon, because there's just so much information that needs to be out there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Lovely. And all those links will be in the show notes. And is there any final words of wisdom you want to share?
Yes, I would like everyone to remember this is a chapter in your life. It is a journey. Please don't suffer alone. Katie, you started that journey very early, preparing for pregnancy. A lot of the women I speak to have had a horrible pregnancy, difficult pregnancy, but would love to have more children. Oh, I always recommend starting with recovering, not just physically, but get the mental health support. Anyone who's survived a hyperemesis pregnancy, there's going to be a sound, there's going to be a smell, there's going to be a sight, something that's going to trigger them. And you want to make sure you're at peace with all of that as best as you can be, so you can enter that new pregnancy in a healthy state of mind as well as physical, and therefore not have that extra stress that might increase those hormones being secreted from the placenta. So that's start a nice clean slate and reach out to your community, starting with you, Katie. Thank you so much.
Yes, that's amazing advice. Really preparing yourself for success as best as you can, setting up that support and beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for being on and just sharing about your story, your passion, your wisdom. And I know with you in the background of this, there will be more information to be had and to be shared. So you guys definitely have a maternal health advocate right here with Danielle. So thanks so much.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you as well.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.